Can you give us a little sort of like the layman's background on like, okay, what is aneuploidy? How does it
Yes.
relate to cancer? Why is it that you're convinced that it is the cause of cancer as opposed to genetic mutations and things like that?
Right. Okay. We'll just start like where the book does. Back over 100 years ago, it was David Hansemann. He was a German back in the late 1800s. And they had very good, high quality microscopes in those days. And then Theodor Boveri, also a German back in that period. Hansemann and Boveri knew each other. And Hansemann worked on cancer. That was his thing. And Boveri worked on development of organisms. Fertilized egg, how it progresses, goes this way and that way, net biology. Brilliant genius that he was. And of course, cancer was a developmental thing. And it had to do with cells. And he understood all of that part really easily. But, so he wasn't really a cancer researcher when he got started, but Hansemann was. And Hansemann, under a microscope, he had examined over 10,000 different cancer cells, over a period of time. And no two were alike. He took photographs of them, had good cameras on those microscopes in those days. He actually drew pictures, with pencil drawings of the cancer cells. And he had the normal cells of a certain type, whether it's your liver, your kidney, your blood cell, they look like photocopies of each other. They're very, very, very similar. All right. And the cancer cells, no two are alike. Your normal cells, we have about 20 to 40 trillion cells in our body, you know, and we have 46 chromosomes, two pairs of 23. 23 come from the mother, 23 come from the father. All right. And those 46 chromosomes in a lifetime stay put in your body after your cells, 20,000 to 40,000 cell divisions in a lifetime. And they have very few little mistakes. That's an astounding thing. And those 46 chromosomes stay in the normal cells. The cancer cells, they have an abnormal number, imbalanced number, and they just every time a cancer cell divides, an aneuploid cell divides, it scrambles. It's like shuffling a deck of cards. You never get the same combination of the chromosomes as the cells divide. And that's what Hansemann saw. He saw that with his microscope. So that was very, very good evidence that these chromosomes, the word chromosome was actually pretty new in those days to call it chromosome. They called them other things, but then they started calling them chromosome. And he never saw two alike, and they're all different. And Boveri, like I say, he was talking, he was communicating with Hansemann. But Boveri was interested. He looked at it in terms of an imbalance because when he looked at living things as how they progressed, he understood that very, very well. And obviously, these cancer cells were never balanced. They were just always changing, all the time. No two are alike. To this day, there are no two cancer cells that are alike that have the same combination of chromosomes. They break them up, they stitch them back together, and they almost always die, thank goodness, because they're damaged. All right. And so Boveri, he did some extraordinary experiments, very, very simple experiments. Anybody could understand what he was doing. I even put him in my book in there, about how he talked about the consequences of these unbalanced chromosomes. And he spelled it out. He finished that book in 1914. He died the next year, 1915. Of course, that was during the World War II. World War I was 1914 and 50. And Boveri died, and it never took off. His chromosomal imbalance theory. Thank God he published that book, though. That he did because, we wouldn't know this. I wouldn't have known it. And then there was the Second World War and all the horrors in Germany. And then Watson and Crick discovered the double helical structure of DNA in 1953. And the United States was not the lead, was now the leader of the world, not Europe. And so they changed. Biology became molecular at that point, and it lost its trappings as really biology. And that switching to the DNA, people made it too important, and then they thought that the DNA was the instruction. They thought the genes were, were these things that I like to use this analogy. A lot of people think they don't even know this. Most people don't even know it. Not only the genome project, one of the genome projects, and a lot of them now have confirmed it, different species. A lot of people, public doesn't know this. Humans and mice and a lot of other animals, we have
Yeah, the
99% of our
same. Yeah,
genes are identical.
that's wild.
You know that?
Yeah.
Identical. And something like 80% or so are in the same sequence in mice and humans. All right. So where is anybody writing a book? How do those same genes know to make a mouse or make a human or a tortoise
Yeah,
or
right?
anything else? All right. Well, it's because the thing is that the genes are not an instruction manual. All right. They just code for things like how to make they're like a spelling that tells you how to make a protein, that protein. That's what that gene does. And I like to say that the genome is a biological dictionary. All right. It's a biological dictionary. In other words, think of the Oxford English Dictionary, which comes in 23 volumes, just like we have 23 chromosomes. That's why I like this analogy. Everything that was ever written in English, you'll find those words in the Oxford English Dictionary. Keep adding new ones to it all the time. All right. But guess what? You can study the Oxford English Dictionary or study the genome, your whole life, and you'll never find my book or Shakespeare play or
Right. Yeah.
anything in the Oxford English Dictionary, you know?
Yeah.
And you study those genes your whole life, you'll never discover a mouse or a human or cancer. So gene mutations do not cause cancer. Let me tell you something else that the public is not aware of. But many of the mainstream cancer researchers over the past 10 years, and I even give presentations on this, I think I may have even quoted some of them in my book, I'm pretty sure I did, that acknowledge that cancer genes don't exist, that they don't cause cancer. All right. And more people are starting to talk in the mainstream scientists are starting to talk about chromosomes, but in connection with cancer genes.
Hmm.
They cannot do away with the gene, all the gene stuff. It's a $1 trillion industry. The genome approach to health and
Hmm.
cancer and changing all these things is totally worthless. Okay, now I'm going to pull on the brakes right here.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I, I could go on and on and on. I've gone a little bit too far on that one.
Well, that's great. But when it's interesting because this was going to be another question of mine, which is that like it struck me, having read it and then kind of trying to poke around and do a little preliminary research before we spoke, was that now more than ever before, the gap between what you're saying and what kind of like mainstream cancer research is saying is much smaller. I mean, I would imagine it seems like that your approach is, I know you're saying they haven't separated yet from genomic research, but like it seems like they're at the very least acknowledging and kind of trying to include chromosomal elements in their analysis too. Do you feel that's progress, or do you feel like there has to be a split from genomes genetics to really feel
It's not
successful?
progress. It's
No.
not progress. There's so many things wrong with it. They're just trying to keep the whole shoot match going. All the money coming in, the papers getting published, drugs being developed. And that they're just using these little techniques to just keep going, and that's why there's a lot more discussion about chromosomes, but not chromosomal imbalance. They don't talk about that at all. They talk about it in terms of the genes and gene mutations, about
Yeah.
how this gene on that chromosome does something, and another thing that is actually is considered scientific misconduct. You're supposed to. You learn this. We learned this in school. When you're working in a field, you are supposed like a specific thing like cancer or this enzyme or whatever. You have these citations, these references you put in the prior history, the prior literature to what you were doing. That's really how you even learn how what you want to do, what you're trying to work on is by the prior literature and what other people have done. And you want to extend it, expand on it, or refute it, or do whatever. But you cite the prior literature. All right, they still do that, but they never mention Peter Duesberger or me, and they haven't for years. Uh, y- you know, and these things are blatantly about chromosome. They should. We were the chromosome people, chromosomal association. Well, Theodor Boveri, I cite Theodor Boveri, Hansemann,
Right.
Papa Nicolau. That's how you're supposed to do science. All right. And here are Peter Duesberg and Dave Rasnick. we proved Theodor Boveri's chromosomal imbalance. We proved it experimentally. Peter did the experimental stuff. I covered a lot of it in the book. Of course, we have the scientific papers that we published on that, and the other book that was done. And this is the theoretical and the experimental work, and we crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's that there is. We've explained everything that is known about cancer, the time course, why gene mutations can't do anything, how the imbalance, why cancer is slow progressing, and the chromosomal imbalance is one of the reasons. There's not a single thing about cancer that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean we've covered everything, but everything that I know of, we have covered it,
Gotcha.
and it fits in perfectly with the theory. That's how you prove something in science.
Right, right. Is it am I correct in saying that the mainstream cancer research acknowledges and agrees with you on in terms of, like, the existence of aneuploidy and, like, that it's more like they're saying it's you're saying it's caused by aneuploidy, they're saying we have aneuploidy, but that's not the cause. Is that sort of the
Yes.
major okay. So that's the disconnect. Are there people who are either approaching you or doing independent research, trying to sort of do exactly what you're doing to sort of reproduce it? Are you getting people? Are you getting converts?
Oh, people have done well, not anymore. I'm not in the lab.
Oh
I'm
yeah, yeah. You're
retired now.
writing now, yeah.
But I mean, people have been doing this. I even have it in my book. People had discovered the chromosomal imbalance theory of cancer. Boveri was one. Papanicolaou did. I forget the other guys' names that I mentioned in there. They published papers. They didn't go anywhere. It didn't take off. But you see, these things were independent. And these other people didn't even know those other people. They
Right,
discovered it on their own. And
right,
that's sort of like independent confirmation, you, you know. And then Peter and I, we didn't invent it. We rediscovered it, you
right,
know. I mean, we knew about it. We knew about Hansemann and Boveri and stuff, so we didn't discover it in that sense. But we proved it. That was our contribution. We proved Theodor Boveri's aneuploidy theory of cancer, and then extended it far beyond that.